Let us embark on the ultimate voyage. And then I thought, I'd be on the ocean, on a boat with all the other Chinese ships behind me, and maybe like the ancient port of Nanjing. And I could be in Admiral Zheng He's clothing, like the robe and the cloak and the hat. What do you think?
Okay, but are you sure you're going to be able to find all that stock footage?
Yeah, it shouldn't be too hard. Come on, Google. Hello all, I am Jeff, and this is Tabletop Toolbox. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to Ultimate Voyage, a game I'm comfortable calling a fairly unique, open-world experience. Ultimate Voyage is designed by Leonard To, with art by Charlie Chung, and published by Little Monks. Leonard's previous design credit includes two fairly heavy war games focused on the Chinese War of Resistance spanning the 1930s and 40s. Ultimate Voyage, which I want to point out real quick, is a prototype game, so everything I say and show here is subject to change. But anyways, this game is more of an open-world adventure-style game where players represent the captain of one of Admiral Zheng He's treasure fleets in the ancient Chinese Ming Dynasty. Play takes place on this central map of Asia and Eastern Africa. Players will use ships to travel to as many as 15 different ports across the map, depending on player count. Each port will track its affiliation with Admiral Zheng He, offer unique and valuable goods for trade, provide knowledge players can gain through exploration, and can be enhanced by a player's depot. Players will take their actions using action cards in a manner similar to that of Ark Nova or Civilization: A New Dawn. Each player has the same 5 action cards arranged in a row above their player board, and the strength of each card is relative to its position in the row. The leftmost has a power of 1, the rightmost a power of 5. However, players can increase or decrease the strength of that action in 2 different ways. At the beginning of each of Ultimate Voyage's 9 rounds, the first player will roll these 3 deity dice. Everyone then sets these deity dials on their player board equal to the value, which could be positive or negative, of each die. When players take an action, they must assign one of these deity dials to the chosen action, increasing or decreasing its power. Players may then spend porcelain, soldiers, or both, depending on the action chosen, to increase the strength of the action. The amount of resources required grows exponentially though for each increase in strength, 1 for 1, 3 for 2, 6 for 3, etc. Unlike in Ark Nova, however, the cards don't shuffle down at the end of each turn, but instead after each round, which consists of 3 turns. So the strength of your action cards is locked in for the entire round. You can take an action more than once in a round, but the card strength will be 0 for any future turns before adding the deity dial or spending any resources. Now, each of these actions are somewhat complex, and in the interest of this preview video, I'm not going to go into depth with each one, but I'll start with probably the most complex action of them all, sailing. Of course, players will use the sail action to move their ship or ships across the map. Arrows between each port will dictate the required cost of movement based on the direction of the wind, which is dictated by the background color of the current round space. If you're sailing against the wind, you'll need extra strength to add to your sail action. You may also have to sail through storms, which also appear, move, or dissipate as determined by the current round space. Now, if you are the first to reach one of the ports in the game, you'll have to roll the magenta sun die to determine the affiliation of the port to Admiral Zheng He. Affiliation ranges from mostly friendly at value 3 to hostile at value -2. As long as the port isn't hostile to Zheng He, players will be able to trade with the port, explore the port, or build a depot there. If a port is hostile though, even if discovered that way, a player will be forced to spend their next action engaged in combat. In combat, the player's action strength must exceed the sum of the port's strength, indicated by the number of these knowledge spaces on the port, and the absolute value of the olive-colored moon die. Olive me some formulaic combat, ha-ha! If the player wins, they establish a new ruler at the port and bump its affiliation to the max using their own player cube to indicate that the port is now a tributary of the Ming Dynasty. The combat action card can also be used for construction instead. Players can build as much stuff as they want on a single turn at a cost of 4 action points per construction project. Depots can be built at ports, increasing the value of any action taken there by 2. Kilns or training camps can be built on a player's personal board, providing porcelain or soldiers respectively in between each round of play. I've already briefly mentioned trading and exploration. These actions let you collect trade tokens or knowledge cubes from each port. Knowledge cubes gained by exploration can be used to take an extra action on your turn, to gain a private objective, which I'll cover in a moment, or to upgrade one of your cards, which would let you share your action points across multiple ships you might have out on the board. Trade tokens gained by trading provide a variety of bonuses like extra knowledge, permanent increases to your deity dials, or increasing your score on the prestige and profit tracks. These tracks along the top of the board tracks each player's prestige and profit. Along these tracks are tokens players can choose from when they reach those spaces, allowing them to either upgrade a card or gain a new ship. Ships are placed at a port where a player has an existing ship or a depot. When upgrading an action card, it is flipped to this side showing this arrow, and a plus token is placed in the arrow, adding permanent strength to the card. This can be upgraded once more to provide a total 2 additional strength. The last formal action in the game is diplomacy, which is a non-military method to increase a port's affiliation with Zheng. In addition, each player has the ability to use some of the strength of their current action to take an optional scouting action on their turn, before or after their chosen action. This can be used to scope out the trade goods, or even determine the affiliation level of a nearby port no one has yet reached. The other thing I want to cover here real quick are story points. Each region of the map has a story to tell, represented by these tracks along the bottom of the main board. Players will place and move up a cube on these spaces each time they max out the affiliation of a port, gain 2 or more knowledge cubes, gain certain trade goods, or sail successfully through a storm. At the end of the game, the player in the lead on each of these tracks will score the gold point value shown on each track, while the other players will score the silver value or the number of the space they've reached on the track, whichever is lower. And before I sum up endgame scoring, I want to mention 2 important types of cards players will interact with throughout the game. Encounter cards can be collected by a player either by scouting or whenever they sail to a new region on the main board. These usually provide players with a choice of 2 options, the lesser of which may provide a small reward or simply tell you to put the card on the bottom of the deck, while the other might provide better rewards, but usually with some sort of additional cost or a penalty, like weakening the strength of your next action. There are also objective cards. 3 of these will always be visible and available to all players, and they'll track their progress on them using their player cubes. When a player has placed enough cubes to claim the card, they do so, placing it next to their player board before revealing a new objective card. Objective cards provide points to a player at the end of the game. Now, the game can end in a few different ways besides running out of rounds, and I won't cover them all here, but at the end of the game, players will start off with a score equal to their lowest position on either the prestige or income tracks. They'll add points from the story tracks, as I mentioned, and points from any completed objective cards. And then there's the Porcelain Tower of Nanjing. During the game, players can use a sail action to return one of their ships to Nanjing. Each ship returned to Nanjing leaves the game permanently, but adds 1 level in the player's color to the Porcelain Tower. Should the player return their flagship, the one with screen printing on the piece, they will also place extra levels equal to the number of tributaries they currently have on the board, represented by their own player cube on the affiliation track of any port. And this isn't as easy as you might think, as in between each round, the affiliation of each port will drop if there isn't a ship sitting there. If it drops to 0, the tributary is lost, and if it drops to -2 or hostile, any player's depot there is removed as well. At the end of the game, each level a player contributed to the Porcelain Tower is 1 additional point. And of course, the highest score at the end of the game wins, though there's a little flavor text in the rulebook depending on the overall end condition of the game. So throughout Ultimate Voyage, players will be racing to complete objectives, trying to contribute to the story of each port, trying to maximize both their reputation and their profits, and possibly returning home to tell about their adventures. And honestly, it's all a pretty unique experience. So let me say this real quick. If you are not a fan of randomness, this might not be your type of game. These deity dice are proof that some gods can be mean. You might start off the round with a bunch of negative values, weakening everyone's plans for the next 3 turns. In a recent playthrough, I lost 7 points in a single round after I attempted to weather a storm, losing more soldiers than I had to spend, only to land at a new port that turned out to be hostile, and I was obliterated in combat in the following turn. There is some mitigation available throughout the game, and in reality, a lot of the mechanisms surrounding sailing are in fact push your luck. Hindsight being 2020, I probably should have stayed put that round. Also, the objective cards can be a little bit swingy, as a player may already be close to achieving a goal at the moment the card is revealed. Though, I will mention that if a card is revealed that can immediately be claimed by any player, it is instead immediately discarded, and I like that rule. On that note though, I will also add that there are a lot of rules in this game. A lot of if this then that, or else this or else that. It's not a heavy game, but I'll admit that I had to play through this two-handed on my own before I felt comfortable teaching it to anyone else. But honestly, once I did, the game really opened up to me, and it started to make a lot more sense. The breadth of the decision space available to players came into focus, and the challenge of the game became more clear. So, is this really the ultimate Voyage? Well, I can't really answer that one for you, but I can tell you to head over to the Kickstarter page, to which I'll include a link in the description of this video. And perhaps you'll find the inspiration to journey for the honor of Admiral Zheng. Cheers. Or better yet, Genbi.